And today's guest on the Financial Planner Live podcast is Russell Cook. He is a senior partner here at Foster Denovo. In 20 years, he has built a practice with 60 million of assets under management. In this emotional career journey, we talk about a rare blood cancer diagnosis. We also talk about a second brain tumour diagnosis in his career here whilst at Foster Denovo.
I got diagnosed with a life-threatening blood cancer when I was 49. My family, on the other hand, are being told I'm unlikely to survive till the following morning. You know, I spent most of 7.5 months in hospital fighting for life. And much of my demeanour is about looking forward. So I gave myself a job whilst I was in hospital, by the way. And that was, your job is to survive until 6 o'clock the following morning when they came around to take your bloods again.
His own positive mental attitude towards life and pushing forward, regardless of the obstacles that are put in front of him, is something that everybody should listen to, and just how inspiring that is.
I just came out of it determined I was going to do something, and nothing was going to step in the way. So I've always looked forward. I've tried not to dwell on things going wrong.
We talk about how his own personal experiences are weaved into the private client journey. We talk about building a team and a support network. We talk about just how Foster Denovo helped him in his 20-year career during those tough times and the good times.
Now, I have a admin client manager who's utterly brilliant, and I have a paraplanner who does the same thing, who's been utterly awesome. And just those two people, over the last 5 or 6 years, they've been largely responsible for a quadrupling of the amount of work that I do.
This is a hugely inspiring episode. You're going to love it. Russell, thanks so much for joining me today on the Financial Planner Live podcast. This is a special partnership that we have with Foster Denovo, where we take a deep dive into the careers of those that work for Foster Denovo. And you've had quite the career. It's been about 20 years here. Mm-hmm. But first off, right, I've got to say about that shirt, because we had a lovely pre-podcast chat, and I commented on how wonderful and refreshing it is to see some colour in financial planning. So thank you for wearing that.
Well, I like to stand out.
No, absolutely. You know, in a sea of, pinstripe shirts and blue trousers and red ties, has that ever kind of been a disadvantage, dressing up that way? And do you do that on a regular basis?
Yeah, I mean, this is pretty much me all the time. I've got used to standing up and doing presentations to, 20, 30, 40, 50 people. And I sometimes felt that if you had just turned up in a blue suit and a red tie and a white shirt, you just came across as being a bit aloof. So I've always done my best to sort of stand out. I want to be remembered for what I've said. And yeah, me and bright shirts, that seems to have been the way to go.
I suppose the early take on personal brand, but in person, right?
Yeah, I guess that is a bit of a branding moment, isn't it? Without even deliberately making it so. So,
hey, if you feel comfortable that way, that's the way it is at the end of the day. I like to wear a black shirt and a black t-shirt. So, you won't catch me in a shirt and tie and a suit or jacket or anything like that these days, unfortunately.
Well, I think perhaps we're moving away from wearing suits all the time anyway.
I think so. So you have had quite a long career here at Foster Denovo. How long have you been within the company?
I've been here about 20 years. I've been working in financial services about 35 years. And I came here mainly because I had two colleagues who I also consider quite close friends of mine who persuaded me that this was the route to go. So I ended up doing a lot of work with them in the early years.
And what sort of work was that? When you got into Foster Denovo, what was your sort of approach and style of advice, and what was the typical type of client that you would work with? And has that changed over the years?
Oh, it's definitely changed. I mean, initially I was part of a team of people that used to deal with small businesses or large businesses. So I'd go in, I'd do presentations to staff, and then we'd sit down with individuals and I'd talk them through what their benefits were and all the rest of it, which was fine. It was very much a production line to a degree. But the financial services moved on, and certain things made that more less practical. So I decided I was going to go back into making a bigger effort into my private clients. that proved to be just a tad difficult because I subsequently got quite ill. But I also learned at the same time that I'm absolutely rubbish at admin, that I can be quite technical, but at the same time, I don't want to be classed as that man from the insurance company. I'm my client's closest financial friend as far as I'm concerned. I want them to meet me point A today and be able to talk about me 10 years down the line at point B and go, thank God we spoke to Russell because he's always had our best interest at heart. And that's me. I've loved doing it. I can have a 2-hour conversation with you and never mention the words pensions, savings or investment because it's all about planning.
Tell me a little bit about that approach then, because you can imagine a lot of people that come into the financial planning profession, they probably think they have to know the ins and outs of absolutely everything when it comes to the products and services. And you're telling me, sat over there, that you've built a fantastic career of really very little conversation about that side of it and more the conversation about what the individual wants or needs.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I've used, I've got a small team of people behind me. And when I realized my admin abilities were quite rubbish, I took somebody on to help me out with the admin side of it. I also took somebody on who had a good relationship with me that dealt with a lot of the research and background work. And the consequence of that is I don't have to go into a meeting trying to reinvent the wheel because somebody's already done the research for me. We've prepped for those meetings, and I've gone in and I've tried to answer every single question before I've gone into those meetings. I don't want ever to be in a position where I go, actually, I don't know about that. I'll have to come back to you. That kind of messes up the flow of things. So I've done the technical stuff in the background, and then you're going into that meeting and it's just a reiteration of whatever you thought was needed last. If we are able to do this, that, and the other, are we hitting all the right notes? And if the individual is coming back to me and saying that's exactly what I wanted, then I can then go, right, well, we can put certain products in place that will do exactly that. But it's not just about products. I go on about it. I've been using Cashflow modeling for absolutely ages now. I don't know if I'm amongst that small group of the first people at FD that started to use it, but to me, it's become my main tool. It's what runs the meeting. Everything is visual, and what I'm trying to do is to say, look, this is where you are at the moment. Now, we don't want you just bumbling along. We want you to have a plan of action, a set of train tracks for you to run on. Now, it could be that you turn around to me today after we've put that plan in place and we never speak again, which would be sad because I'd enjoy working with everybody. But if I've got the train tracks in place and that person is prepared to follow that largely through, then I've done my job. And, the feedback I've had from people over the years, that's been pretty good. I have a pretty good retention rate. I don't lose very many clients. And when I do, I'll be honest, I do take it a bit personally because I've worked really hard for them in the background, although they might think it's all fairly simple when Russell turns up in the room. But actually, I've had to, I've done a lot of background work and I've looked at every possible angle.
What do you do to focus on that relationship part then? Because you're super duper prepared by the sounds of it. And of course, you're using the cash flow forecasting to create a plan. But the little bit in between then, how do you build that trust with them? What conversations are you having? Is it lifestyle financial planning, and how do you approach it? Just so people know.
It is around about lifestyle. We talk about what they want to achieve, what they don't want to achieve. And I also bring in my own situation because I got diagnosed with a life-threatening blood cancer when I was 49. And a lot of the clients I dealt with were in that age group. And if you'd ever spoken to them about life insurance or critical illness cover, chances are it had been very, very much on the back burner. But I was able to talk about circumstances where, when I was in hospital, in intensive care, my laptop still went with me. And I'm feeling like death warmed up, and I'm looking at my laptop and I'm decided, well, I've had some money come in, tiny little critical illness policy. I'm using that to pay the bills going out on the Friday. My family, on the other hand, are being told I'm unlikely to survive till the following morning. Right. So when I'm talking to clients, I'm relaying my own experiences and things where you never thought that they were ever going to happen, but you need to be prepared. And I still go on about that, you've got a 1 in 6 chance of being off work for more than a year before you retire. And yet the number of people I speak to have done something about it is relatively minimal. So again, it's finding out what needs to be protected without it being an expensive issue. It's really talking about family, talking about what their hobbies and pastimes are, whether or not they've really, really thought about retirement. And that's another area. I mean, most of my clients are in that 5-year pre-retirement phase or just post-retirement. And I talk about the psychology of stopping work. And I say, look, you've spoken to me today because you're a little concerned about whether or not you can stop work. So we're going to go through it. So their anxiety goes through a bit of a wave. Initially, it's going right up. I then put something in place and everybody's a little bit more comfortable. They understand where that money is going to come from, when it's going to come, whether or not they're going to pay too much or not enough tax or whatever it might be. And their anxiety comes down. They then get to the point where I'm now involved. They've got to speak to their manager at work and their anxiety goes up again. It goes through the roof. And then they eventually come to the day where they're actually stopping work and their mates at work are big party and everything. Anxiety's gone down. They're feeling pretty good about it. And the day after, they have this dawning realization, oh my gosh, I'm no longer earning 100, 150,000 a year. I've got to rely on my savings and my pension. And that's when they come back to me again. And you can tell the anxiety has gone through the roof. So my job is to try and give them that certainty, give them that security, and basically put them at their ease without necessarily telling them off, because you do have clients that will overspend. 1 minute you're on 150 grand a year, next minute you're on nothing, but you're still spending at the same rate. So we have a long chat about trying to, get things slightly more under control. It's just talking.
Your own personal experience then of in 2010 when you got blood cancer, essentially, and that took you out of work. You had a small critical illness policy in place. So that whole experience of going through what we often think won't happen to us is weaved into the actual journey with your clients as well when it comes to the fundamental foundations of financial planning, which is life protection, critical illness cover, and all of those things that we think we we hope we never have to cash in on, but are there. Talk to me about that then. Talk to me about the power of going through something quite traumatic and how you do position that within, first off, how is it, that was traumatic for you, right?
Yeah. I think I'm rather like a plumber with a leaky tap. You've got the tools, you just haven't got around to fixing the problem. And I'll be honest and say that as a financial planner, there's probably a lot more personally that I should have done before I got ill. But I did put certain things in place. I made sure that my family were not worried about any mortgage outstanding and things like that. But I think what it has done is it's meant that when I'm talking to people, I'm not talking to them as like a statistician. I'm not quoting a load of useless facts and figures. I'm actually saying, look, this has happened to me and this is what we had to do next. I mean, my dealings with MDS were pretty horrid, to put it mildly. I spent most of 7.5 months in hospital fighting for life. And much of my demeanor is about looking forward. So I gave myself a job whilst I was in hospital, by the way. And that was, your job is to survive until 6 o'clock the following morning when they came around to take your bloods again. So I've always looked forward. I've tried not to dwell on things going wrong. And I ask clients to do the same thing. You've got to look forward. Don't look at what's gone wrong. Don't really highlight that you've had a £500,000 pension pot that's done nothing for 10 years. That's irrelevant at this point. From this point on, we now need to put strategies in place that will put you in a better position in the future. Now, we have to understand what you're not going to like. What sorts of things upset you. Are you going to be worried because there's something simple like a change of government? Well, it's not simple, but it's, in your personal financial planning, is that going to upset it in some way? So you've got to ask all these questions. What is it that's going to really upset the apple cart before we can then put a plan of action in place to make sure all of that certainty and security is there?
Do you feel like your lived experience puts the client into a situation where they can open up and be honest about maybe some of their fears and worries and things about the future that maybe they wouldn't tell another financial planner?
I think so. I mean, I've had some wonderful conversations with people over the years. I've got clients that have been diagnosed with lung cancer, you name it. There's been all sorts of variants on a theme. And I think they do understand that I know where they're coming from. But rather more interestingly, because of my own family's background, I've learned what they went through. So I have a client at this moment that's dealing with a family, fairly horrible health issue. And I know what they're thinking now because I've seen what my own family were going through. And it just gives me that little edge. It means I understand straight away what you can recommend and what you can push along and what you really need to step back away from. And it's just understanding what's going on in that person's mind. It's talking. And again, I can have a chat for hours with somebody and never talk about financial planning. It's just one of those, I don't know, I couldn't put an exact figure on what it is I do. I just happen to do the right thing. And I think that's borne out in the number of people I deal with and the fact that I think all of them have I have one of these net NPS scores.
Yeah.
Apparently it looks quite good.
Yeah, well, Foster Denovo as a whole has a fantastic.
It's up in the 80 something.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. What a great way to measure the client experience. I think it's such a positive way to do it.
Yeah, I think anyone coming to work with FD, you've got a great group of people around you. When I got ill, I had 6 advisors stepped in. They did stuff for me. I was too ill to worry about it, to be honest, but they just, stepped up to the mark. I can always remember one of them came to see me in hospital. It was the day after I'd come out of intensive care. I weighed about 10 stone. I looked like a bag of bones and not very good, but I felt actually pretty good. And he appeared at the entrance to my room, all smiles, and then his jaw just dropped. And the consequence of that is everybody in this company saw a picture of me in intensive care because he was pretty taken aback. So I think we've got a really lovely group of people here. And I would say to anybody coming to join us here, try and get those relationships working. Some of them will be better at certain areas of your business than others, we do a lot of splitting of business. We get someone else to come in and do stuff for us. I've got a colleague of mine up north who has looked at all of my final salary type questions, and I've got clients that will deal with small business as well, and we get them in touch with the consultants that can best help them there as well. So I think we've got the right ethos. Also, as I've harped on about this before, my admin is awful. I know that Foster Denovo are always desperately trying to take the consultants away from the box ticking, humdrum stuff in the background and get them into doing the bits that they really enjoy most, which is upfront and personal with clients. And that's where I am. I'm lucky in that I have a admin client manager who's utterly brilliant. These people, they're worth their weight in gold because they take over your diary and they take over all the little niggly bits and they completely resurrect you, get you out of trouble in terms of dealing with paperwork. And I have a paraplanner who does the same thing, who's been utterly awesome. And just those 2 people over the last 5 or 6 years, they've been largely responsible for a quadrupling of the amount of work that I do.
That's amazing. So quadrupling the amount of time that you spend with clients and generating business. Now, let's give the listeners some context. When you join, when you're in Foster Denovo, the ecosystem, you run a partner practice essentially, and Foster Denovo have an ecosystem where they train and develop staff to be able to support partner practices, which is amazing for you because that takes away a lot of the pressure of having to recruit people, find people, train people, develop people, and frees you up to go out and speak to more private clients and do the bit you love doing, which is the highly emotional intelligence side of the business of being a financial planner, sitting down with clients and hopefully putting a plan together is going to make them feel secure and happy. And what I like to say is financial well-being. I look at financial planning as financial well-being. You know, it's about making somebody feel calm about their future and that someone's essentially there with them along the way. Like if you went and wanted to get good at running, or you wanted to build your muscles up or lose some weight, you go and see a coach, wouldn't you?
Indeed.
With your practice, then again, some context, like, you know, it's helped you to go out and smash through and get new clients, right? But how much have you got under management? How many clients have you actually got?
It's around about 120 at the moment. The last time I did a stock take, so to speak, it's around about 60 million under advice. If I go back to 6 or 7 years ago, it was a fraction of that. And I had to make a decision about paying for somebody to come in and do some of the donkey work for me at a time when I was struggling a wee bit to justify the expense. And because typical financial advisor, you think you can do everything. Well, I realised that I couldn't. So I got somebody on board, and within about 12 months, I was double on what I used to do. And that's carried on and on and on. I mean, the latest figures, well, if we get to the end of July when my buyout effectively finishes, I'll be disappointed if we've done less than 450. And when you think this is really just me as a one-man band with a support staff, it may not be stellar like some of the guys here at FD, but for me, that's all happened in the last 5 or 6 years. So I've gone from, you know, just about keeping my head above water to making a conscious decision to say, actually, I've got to subcontract some of this work to other people who are better at it than I am. And if it's ever a top tip, always employ somebody who's better at it than you are, because otherwise you'll never get the time.
Do you wish you did that sooner?
Oh, absolutely. To be honest, I had countless colleagues here. This is what you need to do, Russ. And I'll go, yeah. But I think there were a few other little changes in the way that we worked. We had RDR come into play and things like that, which suddenly put some different pressures on me. And I did eventually have to say, actually, I can't carry on like this. I need that support and I need that help. And, we went back to Foster Denovo to say, well, okay, who can I use? And went from there.
Your illness would have taken it out of you. As you said, you came out of the hospital 10 stone. That resilience then to get to this level is impressive. Can I just ask, I find it so admirable. It's like your journey is inspiring. To be sat in a bed worrying that you're going to die the next day, to recovering and thriving, basically. I just find it massively inspiring. What do you put that? I just got to ask, what do you put that down to?
I'm I'm quite focused, but at the same time, I don't like giving up. I have a bit of a history of athletics, so to speak. Although I was only a junior at the time, I was a national junior silver medalist in rowing many years ago. I rowed with the likes of Steve Redgrave. We were at the same rowing club together. And I'm one of 4 people that's set up, one of the founders of Oxford Brookes University Boat Club, which is now acknowledged as not just the best rowing club in the UK, but probably the best one on the planet. And my name is in a book. So Peter Smith, thank you very much. What can I say? I mean, I just want to go out and do something. And when I got really ill, I realized what everybody around me was doing to help me. in terms of the medical profession and the charities and that get involved with blood cancers. And I just decided I wanted to give something back. So I forced myself to walk to the end of the driveway, walk to the end of the road, walk into the village. And then that turned into a bit more of a jog over a period of a year or two. And I did the London Marathon in 2013.
Wow.
And in the 6 weeks leading up to the London Marathon, I had bronchitis. So furthest I'd ever run in my life up to that point was 7.5 miles. And my wife had absolutely no doubt in her mind that I was going to do this. So I ran the London Marathon. I absolutely loved it, although I did burst out into tears when I crossed the finishing line and thought I've got to do that again. So I thought, what can I do that will raise more money? So the following year, I did the Reading Half Marathon in the February, the Rome Marathon in the March, the London Marathon in the April, the Edinburgh Marathon in the May. I did the assault course down, where the soldiers do all of their stuff. That was over 14 miles. And then I finished it off with Birmingham Half Marathon and raised £28,000 in the process.
Yeah.
And it also inspired me to want to get more involved. So I'm now a trustee of the MDS UK Patient Support Group. And that is the only blood cancer charity in the UK that supports MDS patients. And I hope I'm not going to be stepping out of line when I say you don't want MDS, because 9 out of 10 people don't get a cure. I was just very lucky. I went through a bone marrow transplant 3 times because I had 2 failures. And the third one, actually, the nicest thing that came out of it wasn't me coming out of it all right. It gave a career to my son.
Did it?
Because he was a 15-year-old. He donated bone marrow to me. And yeah, sorry about that. I'm getting a little bit.
This is it's okay. Just take a breath.
But he, my son is now a doctor at A&E in Bristol Southmead.
Beautiful.
So we sort of changed his outlook. My daughter, it didn't really change hers dramatically, but she still works on the side of business where you are looking at charitable work, and she lives and works in Sydney, Australia. But yeah, I just came out of it determined I was going to do something, and nothing was going to step in the way. So yeah, my wife probably would tell you more stories about me and going out running. In the middle of January, it's hailstones and snow and God knows what else outside. I'm still going out running in the dark. And she just thought I was nuts.
Different story, but I can relate to it. I went through a massive amount of depression, very, very dark place, very, very suicidal thoughts for a long, long time. And running was one of those disciplines that got me out of the shit that I was in. And I can relate to that massively.
Absolutely.
There is just something about running. You make me cry now. There is something about running that that just genuinely sets you free, like massively. It genuinely sets you free. And when you apply yourself to something like that, which is just you and the tarmac or you and the grass, and especially out in the countryside when I used to go out running, I used to love my trail running, and you're in control. And it was an amazing place to meditate. And when you run, your mind clears and it becomes very, very, very euphoric.
Yeah, and a funny sort of way, I found it quite useful in the world of business, because I can go out for a 3, 4, 5 mile run, 10 mile run, 15 mile run, and I come back, and you'd normally think, well, if you've pushed yourself really hard, all you want to really do is sit down and have a snooze. Yeah. But I used to find I'd come back and I'd go back to work because my head was clear.
Yeah.
And, it hasn't stopped there, because even in my world of charity, I've stepped in and mentored people that have gone through a similar thing to me. Not all of it has been a success, I hasten to add, because quite a few people I've spoken to, unfortunately, didn't make it. But a few of them have, and we're still in touch. We still talk. I've got a gentleman even now that I got my wife to drive me down to Red Hill because I can't drive. and we met up with a gentleman that's having to go through a second transplant. And I was involved in a campaign because they stopped second transplants. And bearing in mind, I've had 3. To me, this was, live or die. So I've always enjoyed giving back. And I enjoy giving back more than I enjoy asking for the fees when I go to a client meeting. I just don't like talking about it at all.
There is something in giving back, altruism, when you aren't exchanging money for support or help. I've always struggled with the counselling when you have to pay for counselling.
Yeah.
One of the best things that I ever did, like you, is I lent into charities. So I became on the board of trustees for a men's mental fitness charity called Talk Club. And the ability to help others without looking for something in return is probably one of the most healing things I've ever done, because it also shows you, doesn't it, just how far you've come in life when you go through a struggle and a problem and a challenge, and the person who's then living within that in that moment, you can help coach and guide them and give them some faith and belief that they can come out the other side and that you're living proof that that can be done. And often the power of that positive thinking can often be enough to get somebody over the toughest and darkest times, right?
I mean, as you know, more recently, you go through life, and a near death experience most people won't have. They'll just live their normal lives. And I ended up with a second one last October.
Right.
And I didn't realise for months that I had a problem. And my team, my CRM, my paraplanner, everybody around me realised there was something not quite right. I was starting to talk really slowly, slurring my speech occasionally, forgetting stuff in lorry loads. But they were still there. They're still supporting me. And I think part of the issue there is I wasn't looking for problems. I'm always looking forward. My glass is always half full. And I was refusing to acknowledge that there was something going on. I just couldn't put my finger on it. And it was only when I think I had a client meeting, and I remember thinking that I was really struggling to talk and I couldn't understand why. And I mentioned it to my wife. She said, "For God's sake, Russell, go and see the doctor." So I went to see my doctor on a Friday. And in the last 10 seconds of that meeting, I happened to mention, "Oh, and by the way, my memory is absolutely pants." So she went, "Oh, that's interesting. We'll get you checked out, Russell." So much to my surprise, the Sunday morning, I had an MRI scan. And on the Monday morning, I had a phone call from a neurologist, and she said, "We need to get you in to have a chat about your scan." And I said, "Well, I'm a big boy. Why would you want to come in? Why want to come in? Tell me what the problem is." She said, "Well, I'd rather wait till you came in." I said, "I would rather know right now. I'm not going to get freaked out by this. I've been through all of this, near-death stuff before." And she said, "Well, we found what we feel is a tumour, so I need to explain." So I went into the hospital the following morning. I took my son with me because my wife, by this time, realised that it was going to be too emotional for her to easily deal with. But my son, being a doctor, he sat and he asked all the right questions. He understood the answers. And I wasn't completely freaked out by it at the time, although, give me another few days and I was starting to really question whether or not I was going to live. But again, the team of people I had behind me, what can I say? They've stepped in. I feel quite sorry to some degree for my protege consultant, Amita. She was literally thrown in at the deep end, and then she had an accident herself and broke her hand. But all of them, they haven't moaned about me not being there. They haven't sort of said things would have been better had you been there. They've just got on and done it, and they've been brilliant. Do I ever want to go through brain surgery ever again? Absolutely not. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. It was absolutely horrible. And I could tell you some funny stories even then, because on the day that I had 46 metal staples in my head, and I thought I was just going in to have those taken out. When I get to the hospital, I have the two most senior nurses in the hospital. I've got my surgeon, 3 other surgeons, and the senior house officer, just for me. And they took all these staples out of my head, and I didn't really notice them coming out, despite the fact they were enormous. And the surgeon's looking at the TV screen, and there's a picture of my face full on MRI scan. And he's pointing at this grey area around my orbit, around my left orbit. And he goes, "That's your tumour." And my wife looks at it. She goes, "That looks quite large." And he just went, "Yes, massive." So I kind of realised at that second that I'd been taken into hospital almost as an emergency, and that my longevity was probably measured in days or weeks had I not had that surgery. So I'm sorry, I'm going to have to tell you this story as well.
No, you crack on.
I got in the car leaving the hospital. I was absolutely elated because I found out it was a benign grade 1 tumour. If you're going to have a tumour, it's the right one to have. And I looked at my phone as we're driving down the M40, and on it there was an advert. It says, Simple Minds concert in Sicily. Well, I've seen their video of them doing one of their songs in Sicily, in Taormina. So I said, that's it, I'm going there. I'd bought the tickets halfway before we got home. So we're going there in July of this year, and I'm looking forward to that. And there's a funny kind of offshoot to this, because there's a song called "First You Jump," and somebody asked me, "What's the first thing you did when you came out of hospital?" I went, "Well, first you jump." So that was me saying, you've got to look forward. You've got to look on the positive of everything that's gone on. Yes, it was difficult to deal with, and October, November, December, me being me, I was probably spinning it a lot more positively than it really was, because you're still dealing with the fact that you can't feel the side of your head, and I still can't. It's all numb. You're still dealing with the fact that you were struggling to get simple things done. Much better now, by the way, in case anyone from management is wondering what I'm up to. I'm in a great place. I'm looking forward now to retirement, because I've been forced to kind of look at my lifestyle in a way that I've always asked my clients to do. And yes, I'm a bit anxious about it, but although that possibly was brought about mainly by being ill. But I'm okay about it. I'm looking forward to going and visiting my daughter and son-in-law in Australia. That won't be a short trip either. I'm planning on going for a while. I'm looking forward to my son moving into his first home, which is later on this month. There's so much I've got to look forward to. And I'm looking forward to helping out MDS UK. I want to rekindle my trusteeship, if you like, and I want to get involved on the brain tumour side of things as well, because it's pretty horrible. I now know what it's like if you have to go through it. I think I can paint a positive picture for anybody that has to go through this.
No, well, listen, thank you so much for sharing that journey. It's ridiculously inspiring. Your positive mental attitude around it all is just, like I say, it's just hugely inspiring. If I was to bring this also back to running a business, right? If you were to be running that business on your own, directly authorized, let's say, without the ecosystem that you're used to and the support that you've had, especially leading up to you now having to retire probably before you would want to, okay? Being part of that ecosystem where they understand you, they understand your business, and they've built a partner practice around it, and they can start to introduce advisors to take over client relationships, etc. How important and how grateful are you to the ecosystem and the practice buyout option to be able to allow you to step out? And has that been like a backbone, if you like, to the troubling times that you've had?
Yeah, I mean, certainly Foster Denovo stepped in and they've helped me out on that. I think if I'd been on my own, probably I would have been struggling, not to sell a business, because I've done that before. But I think the problem is I have a particular ethos about the way I deal with people. And whoever stepped into my shoes, I'd like to have a say in what they're like. So Foster Denovo gave me that opportunity. So, we've had somebody with very, very similar ethics to myself. They want to achieve the same ends. They want to do it in a similar fashion. And FD were in there to help me do that. I think if I was a one-man band, oh crikey, even if I had to organise it, you're looking at something like 5 years plus before anything much would happen. And even then, you'd have to find a way of transitioning stuff across.
Yeah.
So I think it would have been hard work. I think what we've got here, you've got the option to be able to step away from your business in a time frame that suits you, knowing that the people who are going to be stepping into your shoes are going to be talking and thinking and saying the same things, and they're going to look after the people that you've built that rapport up with over years. I mean, I've absolutely loved working with my clients. I mean, there's a lot of them. I'd be really disappointed if we can't somehow stay friendly, not business, but just, it'd be nice to meet up and have a drink and just talk about life. I think that would be wonderful. And that, again, it's another part of my plan going forward, is just to make sure I keep in touch with people.
Keep those relationships in place
Keep them
that
in place.
you've built for so long. On a sort of ending note here, and you've been on a incredibly challenging journey, of which your positive mental attitude has, and your physical fitness by the sounds of it as well, has pushed you through, right? For anybody listening right now that's in a situation perhaps where they're working on their own and maybe they are feeling that pinch, right? Regardless of whether or not you're going through any health conditions that might come up, you might not. Mm-hmm. How important do you think it is to really kind of align yourself to a model as you get older, for example, that does support you?
Yeah, I think a lot of companies like Foster Denovo especially, we have people within the business who are specialists in certain areas. So we have mortgage specialists, we have life, we have people who specialise in estate planning, and then you have people like me, mainly to do with at retirement, so it's pensions and the associated investments. I think it gives you an opportunity to work with other consultants to spread your wings, make yourself that much more effective, but rather more importantly, it makes you a little bit more essential to the people that you're dealing with, because you can always turn around and say, do you know what, I'm not the best estate planner on the planet, but I know one or two people who would be absolutely ideal, and we can get them involved. So I think, towards the end of your career, you need to be able to know there are other people that you can rely on. And you certainly don't want to put yourself in a position I found myself in 15 odd years ago, where all of a sudden you didn't know who you had to rely on. You had to rely on friends within the business who suddenly realized what was going on in your life, who out of the goodness of their own heart stepped in, and dare I say it, in my case, wouldn't even let me pay them.
Well, you've got some very good people around you, which is a direct indication that the ecosystem and the environment that you're in is a healthy, positive and kind and considerate and caring environment. So only echoes what I hear about Foster Denovo, if I'm completely honest with you. So Russell, thank you so much today for sharing your journey. And if anyone's listening right now and wants to learn more about Foster Denovo and all the different stages of a career at this business, Foster Denovo Talks, the podcast, is now in production. And that's what we're here today to be filming as well. So you can hear about other stories, other career opportunities, and what it's like working at Foster Denovo by following Foster Denovo Talks, the podcast. So Russell, again, thank you so much for being so open, so honest, and all of us here at the Financial Planner Life know that you're going to be kicking ass in retirement. So get out there, get running and get fit and healthy, because you're an absolute trooper and a winner.
It's been a pleasure.
Cheers.